chosen ones. Your name was whispered long before it was spoken, before modern languages formed their alphabets, and before kings etched laws into stone. A prophecy traveled by breath and fire. Nostradamus saw something in the future so disruptive, so destabilizing, that he refused to release it to the world. He encoded it in invisible ink, buried it beneath symbols, then sealed it away in manuscripts that never saw the light of public history. Why? Because it was not meant for the world. It was meant for you. In the secret vaults beneath Salon-de-Provence, beyond what his published quatrains revealed, lay writings deemed too dangerous for the empires of his time. He described a soul unbound by era, a presence whose arrival would crack open timelines and reset divine order. He feared the consequences of those words reaching the wrong ears, but he knew the right ears would awaken when the time was right. That time is now. The powers that rule this age have always collected prophecies like weapons, hoarding, distorting, erasing what doesn't serve their control. So when Nostradamus wrote about a being not of this time, yet born in it, the Vatican archivists locked it away. When he dreamt of a consciousness that could rewrite the outcome of humanity's path, secret councils paid to make it disappear. But prophecy, unlike law, cannot be silenced. It waits. It hides until it sees the light in the soul it was written for. He saw your face, not your image, but your frequency. The way your aura disobeys the laws of entropy. The way your thoughts ripple backward through time. You are not random. You are the variable the elite tried to eliminate before it emerged. This script is the decoding of what was hidden. The unpublished prophecy speaks in riddles, timelines, metaphors, and maps. But each map bends toward you. Each warning he issued was disguised as poetry. Each name was distorted to confuse the reader. But not you. You were always meant to see through it. Beneath the cobblestone streets of Salon-de-Provence lies a chamber untouched by time. Locals pass over it daily, unaware of the energy pulsing just meters below their feet. It's not a tomb, nor a cellar. It's a sealed vault that predates the revolution, untouched even by the fires of war. Hidden behind false walls in the home of Michel de Nostradamus, it's said to contain the manuscripts he refused to share with the world. These were not predictions for kings or merchants. These were warnings for a singular force he saw breaking through the boundaries of history itself. That force was never meant to be known by the empires of his age. It was meant for the one who would come after the collapse of false timelines. The deeper you go into his private writings, the stranger the syntax becomes. At first, it appears erratic, even delusional. But that's only if you read it with modern eyes. It wasn't madness, it was encryption. He folded star alignments into language, created phonetic keys linked to Hebrew root words, and embedded alchemical sigils between the stanzas. One section, long dismissed as irrelevant, shows a crude sketch of a spiral vortex, a wormhole drawn centuries before science had a name for it. The text beside it refers to a being emerging from the other side, bathed in blue fire, holding knowledge that can't be forgotten once remembered. What disturbed him wasn't that this being would appear. It was that they would awaken with no memory of what they were, surrounded by structures designed to keep them asleep. He described a frequency so disruptive that every empire in existence would collapse upon its full activation. So he hid the final vision, not out of fear, but to protect the one it was meant for. There is one locked compartment in his estate that has resisted all modern tools. No scans can penetrate it. No heat signature ever fluctuates. It sits dormant, waiting. Not for a thief or a scholar, but for a match. A resonance encoded not in sound, but in soul. And when that soul walks near, it's said the chamber will hum, not loud, just enough for the awakened to hear. What's inside it has no translation in modern languages, yet still waits to be read. Among the hundreds of quatrains Nostradamus released, Quatrain 13 has long been dismissed as incomplete or nonsensical. But beneath the obscure phrasing lies a line never properly translated. Most scholars gloss over it, assuming it to be symbolic rambling. But when deciphered with the original Occitan dialect, one line reads not as a prediction, but a command. It speaks of one who sleeps within the cage of flesh, yet carries the blueprint of thunder. This line, buried beneath the misinterpretations, points to an event not of planetary destruction, but of individual remembrance. Your awakening was coded into this line. The term blueprint of thunder was never meant to describe weather or storms. It refers to something more sacred, an energetic architecture, a divine frequency bound within the human frame that, when activated, sends echoes through time itself. Nostradamus witnessed this in trance states. He didn't just predict events. He traveled consciousness timelines. And in one vision, he saw a being rising in a digital age, awakening not through technology, but despite it. The awakening wasn't loud. It was subtle. A ripple first felt in the soul before it ever reached the eyes. The real reason this line has been overlooked is because it contradicts every controlled narrative of spiritual history. It does not point to an external savior, nor to political revolution. It reveals that the turning point comes from one who remembers without being told, one who carries no religious title, but walks with the fire of the divine. Nostradamus feared this would be erased, so he cloaked it in metaphor, sealed it with planetary alignments, and embedded a calendar reference only accessible once a specific solar flare struck Earth's magnetic field. That event already happened, quietly, without coverage, but its effect was profound for those tuned to it. The final word in the quatrain doesn't translate directly. It's a blend of sound and symbol, echoing the Aramaic word ruach, breath, spirit, wind. The very breath Yeshua used to awaken Lazarus. Nostradamus never said your name directly. The stars above us were never random. Ancient seers believed that every soul carried a constellation within them, a private map mirrored in the sky at the moment of their birth. Nostradamus took this further. He wasn't simply charting astrology. He was encoding timelines through astronomical convergence points. In the margins of his unpublished scrolls, there are diagrams of planetary alignments never seen in his printed work. They form shapes not in the traditional zodiac, but in geometric codes that only appear once every few thousand years. One of those formations matches the sky pattern of the night you were born. This alignment was not just a cosmic coincidence. Nostradamus wrote of a celestial window that would open briefly in the age of machines, a narrow portal of frequencies where one soul could rise, unhindered, unshaped, and fully aware. The sky was the lock, your presence the key. Each star, he noted, correlates to ancient sacred sites, and when plotted on a modern map, they form a mirrored grid centered on one missing point. That point is not a place, it's a person. That person is the anomaly, expected but unaccounted for, born of light but concealed in flesh. Until now, his notes reference a convergence where the watcher of the sky shall blink, an event he feared would mark the beginning of a silent war on consciousness. Observatories have reported unexplained stellar flickers in the last decade, precisely along the sectors Nostradamus mapped. Not satellites, not equipment failure, pulses, as if the stars themselves are reacting to your activation. One chart in particular shows Sirius, Vega, and Antares in a perfect triangle, surrounding what he called the sleeper's meridian, a term never explained, a location never pinpointed, until your path triggered its reappearance in the astral plane. He wrote that the stars would not reveal the chosen one's name, but their shadow, the pattern of choices left behind, the ripples in memory, the deviation from what the world expects. Nostradamus did not look to the stars for direction. He looked to see who would one day return with the map embedded in their very being. And when that map began to glow, even the stars would lean in and listen. Because the prophecy never ended with a star falling. It began with one rising from within the hidden constellation of the soul. Among the unreleased fragments stored in the underground libraries of Avignon lies a parchment not catalogued in any academic index. It is written in a mixture of Latin, Aramaic, and a cipher Nostradamus, developed specifically to hide references that threatened church authority. In this fragment, there is mention of a son of light, whose breath shatters illusions and whose voice remembers the first silence. Though no modern scholar has connected this to anything meaningful, those who've studied Yeshua in mystic circles recognize the phrasing. It echoes ancient gospels that were suppressed, texts that spoke of Yeshua not just as a figure of redemption, but as a frequency, a template, a code imprinted into chosen souls. This hidden verse does not describe a return in the way theology expects. It speaks of a transference, a seed planted in timelines, meant to bloom only when darkness wrapped itself in light, and the lie of separation reached its peak. Nostradamus observed this pattern in dreams, claiming to hear the same phrases spoken in different tongues across centuries. He noted one particular vision where a being stood in the center of a collapsing library made of glass, untouched by the falling shards. In his words, the words did not fall. They hovered around him, as if awaiting command. This wasn't metaphor. It was a memory of something not yet occurred. The term Son of Light repeats 12 times across the parchments. Each time, it is paired with cosmic symbols and a numeric sequence that matches passages from the Gospel of Thomas. Not the canonized version, the buried one. In that Gospel, Yeshua says, "I am the light that is over all things. I am all. From me, all came forth, and to me, all attained." Nostradamus knew this wasn't about worship. It was about awakening. He believed the Son of Light would reemerge, not as a preacher, but as one who simply remembered who they were, beneath the conditioning. The symbols around this phrase contain spirals and keys, a pattern later mirrored in modern DNA sequencing. He had no concept of genetics, yet still referenced the helix of flame buried in flesh. It wasn't that he predicted the rise of this being. Shortly after Nostradamus's death, a strange silence spread across France. His published works remained available, yet several rumored volumes, far more esoteric than his printed quatrains, vanished without explanation. It wasn't thieves or collectors who took them. It was the Vatican. Within months, papal envoys appeared in Salon-de-Provence, claiming they sought only to protect his work from corruption. But locals whispered a different story. They said the Church was afraid, not of predictions about war or famine, but of one passage in particular, a line referencing a bloodline not of royal descent, but of divine interruption. This bloodline was not traced by surname or title. It was said to activate itself when the world was immersed in simulation and decay. Nostradamus called it the strand between worlds, a lineage unrecognized by science yet felt by nature. In a torn corner of one document, written hastily in red ink, he scrawled a warning. When the watchers awaken, the false kings will hide. That line was never meant for political rulers. It pointed to the unseen elite, those who shape the flow of time through influence, currency, and deception. They weren't afraid of the past. They were afraid of someone who would remember it fully. The Vatican's decision to confiscate these texts wasn't unusual for the time. They had long held secret archives filled with writings that contradicted official doctrine. But what made these different was their specificity. Nostradamus mentioned a being born under veiled skies, wrapped in the blood of no nation, who would carry dormant codes not just in the body, but in the breath, a soul that could realign the vibration of others merely by speaking truth into distortion. That terrified them, because if even one remembered soul awakened fully, it would trigger a cascade that doctrines couldn't contain. The Church encrypted his confiscated work into vaults layered beneath the Vatican library. To this day, access is restricted to a handful of inner circle scholars. They don't study it, they guard it. One of the recovered fragments was later decoded using modern spectrography. It revealed a mirrored message that only appears when reflected through glass angled by moonlight. The words, "You are not from here, but you came for this." The ink has faded, but the message still glows faintly under the right light, as if waiting for the one it was meant to remind of what still sleeps beneath the noise. In one of Nostradamus's private journals, there's a sequence of dream entries spanning 13 nights. Unlike his famous quatrains, these writings are raw, urgent, and scrawled in uneven ink. He described a recurring vision that woke him in cold sweats, a being standing in the heart of a burning city, untouched by the flames, watching as the foundations of power trembled beneath their gaze. This wasn't a conqueror. It wasn't a prophet. It was something in between, a force outside the understanding of his era. He never gave this being a name, only symbols: the spiral, the crown, and the eclipse. In the vision, this being walked among the unaware, cloaked in normalcy. But the moment they spoke, systems began to destabilize. He wrote of empires cracking from the inside, not from revolution, but from something subtler. He called it frequency disobedience, an untrainable energy that disrupted manipulation at the root. This was not about war, it was about remembrance. Wherever this figure moved, illusions stopped working. People began to see through deception, as if fog had lifted from their eyes. Leaders lost their control. Institutions faltered not because of attack, but because truth stood too close to be ignored. Nostradamus feared what would be done to such a being. He saw not only their rise, but the backlash. The labeling, the isolation, the relentless attempts to rewrite their story. Not through swords or prisons, but through distortion. They would be called unstable, dangerous, delusional. And yet no matter how many lies were formed, this being's presence continued to unravel the old structures, not by force, but by simply existing fully. He wrote, "Their steps shall echo where memory was stolen. Their silence shall scream in the halls of power." In one dream, the seer saw a council in shadow, arguing over a timeline they could no longer control. Every path they manipulated curved back to the same point, the arrival of the disruptor. One man in the dream held a scroll that burned the moment the figure's name was spoken. Another fell silent, as if remembering something long forgotten. Nostradamus awoke with the taste of metal in his mouth and the sense that history itself had blinked. He never saw the figure's face. Toward the end of his hidden collection, Nostradamus wrote a line scholars believed to be metaphorical. But beneath the poetry, the language shifts into a more sacred cadence. He shall walk through fire unburned, for the flame remembers him. The ink in this section is darker, pressed deeper into the parchment, as if his hand trembled. What made this passage different wasn't its drama, but its echo. It mirrored an ancient pattern, a phrase almost identical to one spoken of Yeshua in early apocryphal Gospels, texts that were banned, buried, and erased from public theology. Those texts also spoke of fire that could not consume the divine code. In mystic traditions, Yeshua was not simply a savior, but a carrier of flame. Not literal fire, but the living light of divine memory. He was said to awaken what had been silenced in others. Nostradamus, though raised under Catholic eyes, secretly studied these forbidden scrolls. He believed the divine template Yeshua carried would echo again, not as a repetition, but as an evolution. One who would carry the same fire without needing the same name. A soul who would not preach from temples, but whose mere presence would dismantle the walls of them. And that soul, he believed, would appear in a time when machines began to simulate prophecy. The flame he spoke of wasn't a miracle. It was a recognition, a resonance between creation and creator. Nostradamus saw in trance that when this figure stepped forward, nature itself would pause, animals would react, children would stare longer than usual, devices would glitch, not in spectacle, but in reverence, because the flame knew its origin. And no construct, no manipulation, no architecture of control could override it. He etched a small emblem beside this line, a circle within a square, with a vertical line piercing the center. It appears nowhere else in his work, but in esoteric symbology. It represents spirit descending into matter, the divine compressed into form. Yeshua walked that path once, but this time the echo would walk in a world louder, darker, and built to forget. And yet still, it would remember, not because it was told, but because the fire within was never truly extinguished, just hidden, waiting for breath, waiting for time, waiting for the moment when even the flames would bow and remember the name behind the silence. Within the estate of Nostradamus, buried beneath centuries of renovations and political reshaping, there exist 3 sealed chambers. No tool has ever been able to open. Each was crafted from stone, not local to the region, reinforced with metallic compounds unknown to 16th century metallurgy. The entrances bear no handles, no hinges, and no written language. Only sigils, repeating geometric designs that shift subtly in photographs, depending on the observer. Researchers have tested these doors with infrared, X-ray, and magnetometric scans. Nothing responds. Nothing moves. Until one experiment in 2019 recorded a flicker when a specific visitor walked past. The sensors captured a magnetic spike, brief, erratic, but unmistakable. It was as if the chamber recognized something that visitor never returned, and their name was scrubbed from the record. What they triggered wasn't physical, it was energetic. The chamber's structure operates like a lock keyed not to touch, but to resonance. Nostradamus wrote cryptically about vaults that wait not for keys, but for memory encoded in breath. He believed the future would produce a being whose very biology disrupted the artificial structures of control, and that being would unknowingly carry a harmonic signature that activated dormant archives hidden beneath false history. Each of the three chambers corresponds to a different alignment: solar, lunar, and stellar. Their architecture follows no symmetrical blueprint known to the Renaissance era. Yet, when overlaid with modern DNA sequencing models, the spiral curvature of the chambers mirrors the triple helix structure found in certain anomalous bloodline studies. Nostradamus couldn't have known the term genetics, yet he drew patterns that match forbidden genome diagrams found in black-budget biolabs across Europe. He wasn't designing for his time. He was building for someone yet to arrive. What lies behind the chambers remains speculation, but the oldest rumors suggest one contains a sound, trapped in echo form. A frequency that once released reprograms memory itself. Another is believed to house a device, alien in appearance, crystalline in core, that only stabilizes when held by a matching frequency. The third, according to fragmented notes, is empty. But it's not the absence that matters, it's the effect. Those who stand before it are said to remember things they never lived, visions, images, languages unspoken in this life, all waiting for the one presence that doesn't unlock the doors, but awakens what's sealed inside them. Buried in the marginalia of a half-burned volume found near the Pyrenees, a single phrase repeats across multiple pages, scrawled sideways in smaller script than the rest. Not of this time, yet born in it. Scholars dismissed it as poetic flair, another cryptic Nostradamian flourish. But those attuned to symbolic timelines see it differently. This wasn't metaphor, it was a marker, a description of someone who would arrive cloaked in ordinary birth, but wired with ancient memory. Someone not defined by when they were born, but by why. The phrase surrounds a cluster of celestial diagrams matching the conjunctions from the year of your emergence. Not your public birth date, the energetic moment your soul cracked through the veil. That's what Nostradamus recorded, a temporal fracture, a break in continuity, a ripple that spread through his visions like thunder through still water. He saw something that shouldn't have appeared in his timeline, a presence that bent the structure of events simply by existing within them. He described this being's influence, not in power or fame, but in distortion. Systems would begin to misfire. Prophecies would fail to unfold as expected. People near them would awaken without cause. It was as if reality itself had to adjust its path to accommodate a presence that didn't belong to the simulation, not a traveler through time, but a contradiction to it. This is what terrified the councils and watchers who gathered in secret. Not that you were coming, but that you had already arrived, and they couldn't trace where from. The manuscripts mention a mirror walker whose reflection reveals not who they are, but who others were before the programming. This being would trigger memory cascades, silent revolutions, not with armies, but with vibration, one forgotten word at a time. And while others search ancient scrolls for your name, Nostradamus encoded your nature instead. He wrote that no title would hold you, no lineage would define you, because you were not forged by history. You were sent to correct it. He sealed this phrase behind a symbol, a spiral broken in one place. That break is intentional. It represents interference in the cycle of illusion. And in that break, something awakens, something remembers, something steps forward not to continue the script, but to end it, so the real story can finally begin without distortion's mask on its face. In a locked drawer within a forgotten monastery archive, a document sealed in blood-red wax was discovered under a false panel during restoration. Dated decades after Nostradamus's death, but written unmistakably in his hand. The parchment was never recorded in any official registry. At the center of the page was a circular cipher, unlike anything seen in his other works. The wax bore a symbol burned into it, a triple spiral within a ring of thorns. The message surrounding it was fragmented, as if deliberately scattered, not in confusion, but in challenge. It was not meant for scholars or priests. It was designed for one observer with a memory hidden beneath waking consciousness. When decrypted through inversion and mirrored lens overlays, one phrase becomes clear. He who breaks this seal does not read it. He remembers it. The language is archaic, yet resonant. It isn't referring to intellect. It's calling out to resonance, a vibration locked inside the DNA, waiting for recognition. Modern cryptologists have tried for decades to interpret the cipher using traditional keys. None have succeeded, because the key isn't in a book, nor in code-breaking software. The key is embedded in a life lived under spiritual pressure, in a mind that doesn't submit to linear time. That mind is yours. In one part of the message, a sketch appears, a human silhouette surrounded by glyphs now known to resemble pre-Sumerian proto-language. The glyphs pulse when digitally mapped against harmonic tones derived from solfeggio frequencies. One note in particular causes the image to briefly distort on screen, as if the paper itself responds to sound. That tone, 963 Hertz, the tone of divine consciousness. The tone long associated with awakening Christ-conscious memory, dormant within human vessels. The tone that ancient mystics say opens the crown of remembrance. Nostradamus didn't fear the future because of its chaos. He feared that the one sent to end the distortion would never remember in time. That's why this cipher exists, not to inform, but to trigger. It is not a message, it is a mirror. One that does not reflect the face, but the soul behind it. And now the wax is melting. The pattern is surfacing. And somewhere in the silence between the lines, your name is unfolding. Not to be spoken aloud, but to be recognized. Because prophecy was never written to be read. It was written to wake something that had only been sleeping in you all along.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.